Begin the current Daf, Nazir Daf Gimel. Begin 6 lines down at the top of the Yomid, where the Gemara continues explaining the halacha of our opening Mishna, of our parak, of our Masechta, regarding what type of words, even if you didn't say explicitly, I'm going to be a Nazir, that can make you into a Nazir. And the Gemara is going to continue explaining some of these cases. This corresponds with today's Daf. Something discussed in today's Daf are a continued discussion of the many cases of Yadois, which are partial statements, which actually Taisus says some of them are not really per se Yadois, but there are ambiguous statements that we're going to translate that they are a neder of Nazirs. Harini Kizeh, the one that we open up with, I am like this, Harini Mesalsel, I'm going to turn it around, and Mechalchel, which we'll see exactly what does that word even mean, Harini L'Shalech Peda, that it's upon me to send forth my tresses, my hair, Harini L'Tzapayim, it's upon me to bring the birds. The Gemara says, why Rameh holds that it is a valid neder on the case of Harei like Tzipayim, me to bring birds, and the Chum holds it's not. And because what does it mean? What does Tzipayim mean if it's going to be Naziris or not? Also, we have Machlekes in the next Mishnah regarding Nazir el b'chad min hain. If you take the halacha of Naziris is a complex neder, has many different components to it. What happens if you take one of the pieces? I'm not going to have grape skins, I'm not going to have grape seeds. Would that make you a Nazir or not? Some important terms of the concept of today's daf are yodis. As we explained in the previous daf, yodis are like a handle, it's not the whole Naziris, it's a partial statement, which is like picking up the whole vessel. Then there's yadayim she'ein mechiches, regarding if you have a partial statement, it's not even indicative that it even means this thing, that lo have yadayim, it's not going to be considered as a partial statement to make you into a Nazir. So on the previous daf, the Gemara discussed two cases of yadis mentioned in the Mishnah. Hoimer ehei, if someone says, I shall be, and hoimer ena, that I shall be beautiful. Our Gemara continues discussing the other cases of the Mishnah. So we begin 6 lines down at the top of the Yomid on Daf Gimel and Aleph. So the Mishnah said, Hareini Kizeh. If someone says, I am like this, that is going to make him into a Nazir. So the Gemara wonders and says, wait a second. Nehi nami de tafis b'sayrayim. Even if you can explain, as the last case you just told me in the Mishnah, which was ehei no, if you recall from the previous daf, I'm going to be beautiful. I said, okay, beautiful, which mitzvah? How do I know what it means regarding being a Nazir? Oh, because you told me that he's holding on to his hair. So let's say you're going to say, Hareini Kizeh, I shall be like this. He's holding on to his hair. But says the Gemara, and it's ambiguous how to translate these words, Hareini Kizeh, I am like this, loy omar. So Taisus, on the bottom of Beis and Beis, says, some Girsais have these words, D'chsiv behen. I mean, it says, Hareini Kizeh loy omar. Says Taisus, well, seemingly, that's a toys, because the Mishnah explicitly said, because Taisus is reading Hareini Kizeh loy omar, he didn't say Hareini Kizeh. But what it means, that's the Mishnah explicitly says. He says Hareini Kizeh. He says maybe it's a toy safer. But be that as it may, the Gemara's question is that the way you have to translate the words is, if you say Hareini Kizeh, loy omar, he hasn't said anything. What does it mean I'm like this? When you're holding on to the hair, that doesn't tell us anything, as Taisus is going to explain in a moment. Shmuel says, no, it's like the other case. If you recall, we had mentioned in a hey or a hey na, 2 different ways of resolving it, which Taisus already explained to us why each one was unique in the way we had to, and that's why it's 2 different cases. One is when the nose is passing by in front, and one is you're holding on to the hair. So Taisus explains like this. Says the Gemara's question, the Gemara thought that the Nazir is not passing by in front. He's holding on to his hair because it's similar to the previous case of the Mishnah of Ehei Naha, which we explained this to him, he's holding on to his hair. So the Gemara asks, he says, wait a second, saying Hareini Kizeh, that doesn't sound like anything of Naziris, even if you're holding on to the hair. What's like this? Doesn't mean anything. And the big Shmuel answered, no, here it's talking about like when the Nazir is passing by in front. And then it says Taisus, you don't have to even say he's holding on to his hair. He sees the Nazir passing by in front of him and says, Ich will sein Nazir vidos. Oh, okay, we know what you mean. So that's all the Gemara is saying, is why Hareini Kizeh would make him into a Nazir. Next case, the Mishnah said, Hareini Mesalsel. If someone says, I'm going to turn it around, he becomes a Nazir. So the Gemara says, Mimai dahadin silsil saira. As Taisus explains, how do you even know that silsil goes on here to say that he's accepting the zichus? So the Gemara says, no, we find that term by here, because we quote very often in Shas, the maidservant of Rebbe, who is very knowledgeable, especially in words. She said, Lahu gaver to that person, Ad masat mesalsel b'sadecha. Some people like throwing out some very sophisticated words. She was always like, they learned up a lot of halachas from her words that she used. So So until well, you're going to be misalsal in your hair, which basically means to say curling your hair, turning it around. So if someone says harin misalsal, it makes sense that they mean that they're going to grow long hair because you're going to have curls. Says the Gemara, but how do you know? Maybe it means the famous Mishnah of this hafuchba, vafachba, the kulaba. Maybe it's to turn around what you're learning in Torah. The Chsilik says the pasuk in Mishlei salsaleho terememeka. Turn it around and it's going to elevate you. So turn around and around the Torah, and maybe that's what it means that he's going to do. And now Shmuel says hachanam here also is talking about shetafis b'sayroi. It's where he's holding on to his hair. Okay, and Tosfos explained this here and on the previous daf. It doesn't mean. So when he's saying, it means to say that he's actually going to curl the hair. It means to say he's going to be mahapach in a mitzvah that's tluya basar. Again, not the way you would normally read the Gemara. If you were reading without Tosfos, you would think, oh, he's holding on to his hair. Harin misalsal means I'm going to curl it because it's going to be so long. Tosfos says no. It means that I'm going to be mahapach in a mitzvah that's tluya basar. So I'm going to get involved, so to speak, in that mitzvah. Which mitzvah? Maybe Teira? No, I'm holding on to my hair. I'm making it pretty obvious. I want it's a mitzvah depending on the hair, which is that of Nazirs. Next case says the Mishnah. Harein mechalchol. So the Mishnah said, so if you say mechalchol, you're going to be a Nazir. Says the Gemara, Memai dahadan kilkol sayrehu. Where do you get this, that the word kilkol has anything to do with here, by saying harein mechalchol is going to make you into a Nazir? Says the Gemara, Kitnan. We learned the Mishnah Masechta Shabbos that says Sid, regarding the halacha of lime, which is regards to halachas of haitzah on Shabbos, how much is the measurement that you'd be chayiv for carrying? So it has to be something significant, the minimum of what's significant. So Yehuda he says it's kedei losud kilkel. It's the amount to smear some of that lime on kilkel. What does that mean? So Rav explained that Mishnah, it means bas tzida. It means to put it on the hair of the temples, which is to make it smooth and lay it down to make it straight. So you see that the word kilkel refers to the hair on the temples. So when you're going to say arein mechalchel, it means to say a mitzvah doing with hair. Says the Gemara, okay, but ema mezin aniyeh. Maybe it means regarding feeding the poor. Maybe that's what you meant when you said arein mechalchel. Like says the pasuk in Bereshis. Says veichalchol Yosef avav esechav. Says that Yosef supported his father and his brothers. So kilkel also means we know al michiv al kalkala. Say it, not say it, but it means to say on food, on provisions. So Shmuel says hachanami shetafes b'sayf. He says you're right, good point. If you didn't hold on to the hair, maybe it wouldn't be a muzzin. Maybe it wouldn't be a nazir. You would be maybe talk about nurturing the poor. But since you're holding on to your hair, that's an indicator that your intent means for becoming a Nazir. Next case in the Mishnah. Someone says that I take it upon myself to grow a pera, which is a mass fully here. Hariz Nazir becomes a Nazir. So the Gemara has an interesting conversation, again, because we're analyzing his words. So the Gemara says, the guy said, I'm going to be Meshaleach pera. Okay, so pera is a full head of hair. But who said shiluach means to grow it? Who said it's an increase? That means, obviously I'm not cutting him because I'm becoming a Nazir. Who said that? So I'll tell you, the pasuk in Shira Shirim. The pasuk says, Sholachayich. Sholachayich is that what's going to come out of the pardis is going to grow of the pardis, remind them of the orchard of the pomegranates. Meaning, it's really like the way the Rush says that your growths are going to be beautiful, like the paradise remind them, like the orchard of the pomegranate. So you see that shalachayich is a term of what comes out of growth. Says the Gemara, how do you know? Maybe it actually refers to something that you're going to get rid of. So maybe you accept it upon yourself, actually to the contrary, to shave and to get rid of the hair when it grows. Why would I say that? Oh, because Kedechsib, it says a pasuk in Eiv. It says, B'shaleach mayim apanei chutzes. He sends forth the water on the face of the fields. So it's a sending forth, it's a getting rid of. So maybe it's the fakert, maybe not to be Nazir, he's going to cut off his hair. Says the Gemara, good kasha, you're right. I don't learn it off in the pasuk. Tana, peda yolef. In other words, the Tana, the Mishnah, learns out shaleach peda from another pasuk that it says by Kehanim of peda lo yishalechu. You learn that from a Gzeir Shava. What's this Gzeir Shava? Ksiv Hachad says over here, Bamidbar Kodesh Yeh Gadol Pera, when it talks about the Nazir, say he's going to be holy. He's going to have a growth of long hair. Uksiv Hasam Gabi Kohen Hedjid. Now it says over there by the Kohen Hedjid in Sefer Yecheskel. It says, Upera lo yishalechu. And a pera, he should not be yishalechu. Now, just like over there, it's referring to Gidel Sar, which is telling us that the Kohen Hedjid cannot grow his hair too long. So to over here, it's referring to growth of hair. In other words, like the Gemara learns in Sanhedrin, that we know that the growth of the Kohanim's hair from the pera of Kahanim, from the pera of Nazir. To say that Kahanim have to cut their hair at least once every 30 days, because the Gemara asked over there, maybe he shouldn't grow his hair at all, the Kohen. So he said, no, if that's the case, it would say, Lo yishalechu pera, like you're saying. Now it says, pera lo yishalechu, means there should be a pera, just it shouldn't be yishalechu. In other words, it shouldn't grow more than the pera that's written by Nazir. So Taisa explains, he says, when the Gemara is answering that the Tana is learning our pera yalav, not the way you think. It's not referring to the Tana of our Mishnah, because we had asked the question. It says, wait a second, Tana of our Mishnah says, a guy says, Harei l'shalech pera. So the Mishnah says, oh, he's going to be a Nazir. How do you know shalech pera means a growth of hair, that he's going to grow, he's going to become a Nazir? So we attempted to bring a raya from a pasuk, and the Gemara says, no, who said maybe it means sending away and not growing. So the Gemara says, oh, you're right, Tana, pera yalav. So it would sound like if you didn't have taisis, you would think it means to say, oh, the Tana of our Mishnah learns it out from a Gzeira Shava. That you see pera by the Kahanim, and you see over here it means Gidel, so that's how I know. So Taisus, no, that's not going Tana of our Mishnah. It's talking about a Tana Masechta Sanhedrin. The Mishnah over there says that a Kohen Hedjid has to cut his hair once every 30 days. How do you know? Because we learn out where it says pera lo yishalechu, from the Nazir that says Gidel pera. Just like over there, it's 30 days like the Gematria of Yiyah, which is 10 and 5 and 10 and 5 is 30. So the Kohen Hedjid, you can't grow it more than 30 days. And it says lo yishalechu. So you see that, you can't have this shiluach, you can't have this growth of 30 days. So how does it apply to our Gemara over here? So to explain places what it means for our Gemara, that Tana pera yalav, not over here, not the Tana of our Mishnah. In general, we find that the Tana learns a pera, the Kohen Hedjid from the Nazir. So you see that shiluach, when it says by the Kohen Hedjid, pera lo yishalechu, we see that it means a terminology of gidel, of growth, that's what we're learning out from that of the Nazir. Now, some texts have added on to the words of Taisis that he asked, if you're going to say, why didn't you bring explicitly from the pasuk that it says by Nazir? It says Kodesh Yeh Gadol Pera. Why do you need to come out to Gzeira Shava Kohen Hedjid? Says Taisis, no, there it's different, because by the Nazir in the pasuk it mentions Gidol, it mentions growth explicitly, but it doesn't mention anything about Shiluach. But the Kohen Hedjid that says Shiluach lo yishalechu is what we learn now from the Nazir, which says Gidol. And therefore you know from pera that the word yishalechu means Gidol. So you wouldn't be able to learn straight from the pasuk by Nazir. Because although it says clearly by Nazir, but it says the word Gidol, not yishalech. And we're coming to learn on the word yishalechu. It's very important what our Gemara is stressing on. We're stressing on the word yishalechu. How do you know it means that of growth? Then it says to begin to say, wait a second, why don't we just bring the pasuk that says by Kohen Hedjid? Pera lo yishalechu. Why do you need the Gzeira Shava? Why does our Gemara have to bring the Gzeira Shava? So as Taisus, it appears to me that for the pasuk of Kohen Hedjid, you wouldn't know anything that lo yishalechu means growth. Why? Taisus explains, he says, maybe it means even just 2 days. And if you would say harei l'shalech pera, if you learned it out from the pasuk of Kohen Hedjid, you would say it means, okay, now let it grow it. Maybe it means even 2 days. Now, since you didn't say explicitly Hareini Nazir for 2 days, you just said Harei l'shalech pera, so that wouldn't be a Kabbalah's Naziris. Because, as we'll see later on this Masechta, if you accept 2 days explicitly, you have to do 30 days because that's a minimum. But of course you said you could be a Nazir 2 days. If you say Harei l'shalech pera, which means 2 days possibly, if you just had that of Kohen Hedjid, not learning out from Nazir, that means 30 days, so then, okay, you wouldn't know that that's considered as acceptance of Naziris at all. But when you learn a Kohen Hedjid from Nazir, that the Shaluach means 30 days through Gzeira Shava from Nazir, it's like when you're saying Harei l'shalech pera, it's as if you said Harei l'shalech pera shloshim yayim. It's very, very important. You learn this Gemara, you wonder why you didn't need all these pieces. Taisa explaining each piece, why you needed to learn out. Why can't you learn out straight from Nazir? Why can't you learn out straight from Kohen Hedjid? Why does the Gemara have to quote you a Gzeira Shava of Kohen Hedjid from Nazir when we want to learn out what does Harei l'shalech pera mean? So Taisa explaining. says you want to know how the word shilech means a growth, not just a growth of 30 days, because it's making you into a nuz of 30 days. That's only because you're learning it from Kain Hedid, which says the word lo shalechu. And how do you know that lo shalechu over there means a growth of 30 days? Because you learn not the same peta that it says the word peta by the Nazir, which is that of 30 days. So therefore, it's like as if it's understood that you're accepting upon yourself a Nazir, and that's why it's being Nazir Shabbat. Now it specifically says, if you say Harei Lei Shaleach Peta, but if you say, let's say you say Harei Lei Peta, and you didn't say the word Shiluach, which Peta is also a growth of hair, then it wouldn't sound like anything, because the word Peta says also it means a word of uncovering. As we know when it says by the Saitu, Pater Rosh Isha, they uncover the head of the woman. So just saying Harei Lei Peta wouldn't mean anything. So it's dafka by saying Harei Lei Shaleach Peta, that means to say that you're going to become a Nazir. Because the word shiluach means that of growth, and I only know that it's a growth of 30 days. We're learning out that from Kohen Hedger, which says which you learn out from Nazir. That's one mahalch. The Ibai says the Gemara, if you want, I could tell you from you asked me a question. In other words, the Gemara first attempt was trying to say that I know it from a pasuk of Shalachayich Pardes Rimayim. And then you asked me, says, how do you know it means growth? I could bring you another pasuk that means sending away, not growing. So the Gemara said, okay, fine, you're right. I know from Gezerah Shabbat. Now the second answer in the Gemara says, no. If I want, I could tell you from the pasuk you asked me from. That pasuk that you thought you're proving to me means sending away. I could actually prove to you it means growth. So you're not slugging me up, and I could go back to showing that the word shileach from a pasuk in shiur means growth. How so? Because that pasuk that you asked me, which sounds like sending away, the pasuk was sheleach mayim al panei chutzos, which sending forth, not growth, sending away, cutting off. Says no. Hi sheleach mayim. This sending forth the water, nami ribuihu. That also means a terminology of growth. How so? Because the Mikam Rabbi Yosef translate the Aramaic of that pasuk, the chadmashkin leimayu lepeira. That when you're going to take and water the water for the produce, v'rabi, and it's going to grow. In other words, that the fruits are going to grow. So that pasuk of shileach mayim is not a terminology of taking away, sending forth. It's actually terminology of growth. And you see, shiluach, even in that pasuk, means terminology of growth. Now, Tais is bothered by this. He says, wait a second. You find many times the word shiluach, that doesn't mean growth. It means getting rid of. As you have a pasuk in Devarim Chavbez, a well-known pasuk by Shluach Haken, Shaleach to Shalach. You have Vayishlach, every little girl knows of Vayishlach Yaakov Malachim. Vayishlach doesn't mean growth over there, it means sending away. So what are you coming with a whole teretz? You're going to show me how the pasuk I asked you from doesn't mean sending away means growth. So good, I could go back to the first teretz in the Gemara. But what are you doing? I could ask you many more psukim. How does that answer the question? So on that says Taisus, what you could say is that if we would have asked for those other psukim, you're right, we would have answered, we would have to go back to answer number one of Tana Pera Pera Yalaf. But the Gemara is only coming to say, the pasuk you asked from of a Shaleach Mayim, I could tell you, that pasuk punkt you asked me from, that pasuk I can actually say means growth, not sending forth. But you're right, if they would have asked from a Yishlach Yaakov Malachim, they would say, you're right, you got me. I have to say like the first teretz of Tana Pera Pera Yalaf. But he says that's a deichik. Because it doesn't sound like that. It sounds like that the second answer says that you don't need the Gzeir Shavah at all. And you don't need it. But says Taisus, but you do need it, you said. You're just coming to show me that pasuk is not difficult. So Taisus says that no. It says an interesting twist on the Gemara. He says, in the beginning, the Gemara wasn't concerned, but just to find one pasuk that the word shaleach means that of growth. And so the Gemara found you a pasuk of shalachayach, pardes rimayim. But that one pasuk that you brought, the Gemara rejected and said, maybe that pasuk itself means getting rid of. Like I have another pasuk of a shaleach mayim. And therefore you're not going to have even one pasuk to show me that shiluach means growth. That's what the Gemara is answering and saying, that pasuk you're asking from me from shaleach mayim, even that pasuk itself means growth. And therefore you can learn out from it. Or from the pasuk of shaleach pardes. So it says, yeah, although there's many psukim that it means getting rid of, but as long as I have one pasuk that I could show you that means growth, it's logical to say that when the guy said, Harei Alei L'Shalech Peta, he means I want to grow the hair because that he's going to be a Nazir. So of course there's psukim that shalayach means to get rid of. But the logic is what he's trying to tell us is to grow the hair and to become a Nazir. So as long as I have one pasuk to show you that the word shalachayach can mean growth, then I'm going to say that's what he means to say. I don't have to tell you every pasuk means. That's not what the Gemara is saying. Again, if you learned the Gemara simply, you would say like that. He's saying a twist on that. He's saying, no, I just need one pasuk to show me that it could mean that. And then I'll say that it means for that he wants to become a Nazir. Next case in the Mishnah is an interesting case. Because the Mishnah says, Harei like tziparin. Guy says, it's upon me for the birds. Now, Remeir says Nazir, he becomes a Nazir. Chum said he doesn't become a Nazir. So the more difficult opinion is the one that the Gemara asks on, is my time to Remeir. What's your Remeir? Why, if you say you're taking upon yourself an obligation of birds, would that make you a Nazir? Where do you see anything with birds to become a Nazir? So Amar Shlakish, and there's a Machlekes Amaram, why this is. Shlakish says, Tzipaydin smuchin l'seir kibalav. Now, there's a discussion in the Rishonim, as we'll see in Taisus. What is it that is this what he's saying, or this is what we're understanding? But, just to simply translate, it's the birds that are near the hair that he's accepting upon himself. Meaning, the Gemara is going to quote a pasuk right now, that you have the word birds near the word hair. So although you're right, and this is the way Taisa initially says it, that all he says was, it's upon me to bring the birds, because we see in the Mishnah that's all he says. Even so, Rish Lakish holds that his intention of the person is on the birds that are mentioned near here in the pasuk, and therefore what it's understood what he's saying is, when he says, it's upon me to bring birds, he's a Nazir, is because since the word birds are near the word here in the pasuk, mistama, what he means to say is, I'm accepting upon myself a mitzvah that is applicable to birds that are dependent on a mitzvah relating to here, which is that of a Nazir, because if a Nazir becomes tummy, he has to bring birds. And therefore what he means to say is a mitzvah that's dependent on birds. Because as Tais explained, don't explain simply because it's near those words in the pasuk itself, like it sounds like from the Gemara, because if that would be the case, then as we're going to quote the pasuk right now, if a guy says, it's upon me eagles, then for sure he should be a Nazir, because that's actually closer to the word here in the pasuk. So it doesn't really mean because it's closer in the pasuk. It means it also makes sense that it's related to that mitzvah of Nazir, that of Tzipayim. Because when you become Tameh, you actually have to bring Tzipayim. So it's not just because it's closer in the pasuk.
Why is Nisharan more than
Nisharan is closer to the word Saire. As we're going to quote the pasuk right now, the Chsivit says the pasuk in Daniel. The pasuk in Daniel is regarding Nebuchadnezzar. It says, when it's quoting Nebuchadnezzar, it's Adi Saire kinishrin rava, until his hair is going to grow like that of an eagle. V'tefrahi, and his nails are kitziparin, are going to be like the claws of a bird. So in that pasuk, the word nishrin, of eagle, is right after the word saire. Tziparin is a few words later. So Taisa says it can't be just because it's right near it, because then if the guy says harele nishrin, it's upon me eagles, then he for sure should be a Nazir. So it's not just because it's near it. It has to mean also because it's related to the mitzvah of Naziris. So Remeir Saver, says the Gemara, mitvis inish, a person does hatfasa, which we've explained in the previous Masechta of Nadarim. Hatfasa means that you're transferring something, inish, of a neder to make the sanctity, b'midi d'samachle, that something that's near it, you have a pasuk when you say, harele tzipayren, it's near the word sar, and it's related to that mitzvah, so a person is going to go ahead and create his neder based on a word that's near it. However, it's getin to mitbeis. The Rabban who say he's not going to be a Nazir. A person is not going to do hatfas. He's not going to transfer a neder of sanctity by a word that's near it, and that's not how he associates. And therefore, that would not make him into, what do you call that, a yachain mechiach, whatever. That's not going to make him into a Nazir. That's one interpretation. That's the interpretation of Rish Lakish. Rabbi Yechonama, he says no. The kulama, everyone holds loy mitvis, as some Gemaras add on the side, inish, a person not going to do atfasa b'midi d'samachle, on just because to associate words that are near each other. So if the people don't do that, so then so then what's the reason Rameir according to Rabbi Yechonon? Why does he hold if so Tziparim, you're not going to say because it's near the word sar in the same pasuk in Daniel. So then why, by saying it's upon me to bring birds, would that make you a Nazir according to Rameir? For a different reason. Says Rabbi Yechonon, why? The Cheshinan, we're concerned, maybe he's accepting upon himself the birds of a Nazir that becomes Tameh, who has to bring birds. So in other words, the mitzvah of Naziris applies to birds when he becomes a Tameh Nazir, if he's Tameh. So maybe that's what he means to say when it says Harei Elai Tzipayrim. Says the Gemara, wait a second, Mechti, let's see. You just told me Cheshina Kama. You told me that it's a concern. As Taisa explains in Amud Aleph, he says, you're not telling me definitively. It's only when a concern. If that's the case, so Dami Tzipayrim Nedava Kibbalav, maybe accepted upon himself the birds of a donation. Meaning, just to bring a Oila Sa'if as in the Dava, not for Naziris. As Taisa explains, as much as we could explain his words that he's not accepting upon himself a Naziris, just some other neder, that definitely makes more sense. Because a person usually doesn't prefer to accept upon himself birds of Naziris, which is very severe and a tircha, because if you recall, the whole thing of Tzipayre Nazir is only when the guy started his count, it became Tameh, he's got to start all over again. There's nothing more depressing than starting something over again. So it's not logical that a guy would want to accept upon himself Tzipayre of a Nazir that's when he's Tameh. It's more logical to say some other neder, so why wouldn't you just say, Hareli Tzipayre means some birds as a oilas nadav, but to bring to the base of Mikdash. Vos zogs the door that it's going to make him into a Nazir. So the Gemara says, Im Kain, if it was the case that he was just bringing a birds as nadava, then Harei Elai Kain mibayle. Then he would have said, it's upon me to bring a nest or a pier, however you translate that, but like we know the Mesech is Kinim, that when people usually make a nadava of oilas Aif, they usually say a terminology of Kain, they don't say tzipayren. That terminology would tell us that he means to say that of the Nazir. But the Gemara is not finished with his question. It says, wait a second, how do you know that? But Vidilma, maybe, maybe he means to say that he's going to bring the birds of a Mitzayra. In other words, he's going to be obligated in the carbon of a Mitzayra. So if there's some Mitzayra around, he's going to bring his birds for him. Because obviously you can't make yourself into Mitzayra. You could say you're accepting Naziros, you're not accepting Tzaraz. That's not how it works. So what would it mean you're bringing the Tzipayr Mitzayr? I mean, some guy who needs the purification, even though there's no Mitzayr walking in front of him, because Taisa explains, it's not possible there's not one Mitzayr that needs birds. I guess it was very common in biblical times that this should happen. But who said it means Naziris? And moreover, Taisa says another point, because the word Tzipayrim actually is more appropriate by Mitzayr than that of Nazir, because as Taisa is going to explain later on, State in Teira, Tzipayrim by Mitzayra. It doesn't say the word Tzipayrim by the Nazir. So when the guy says Harei Elai Tzipayrim, it would make more sense to say that I'm taking upon myself to pay up some Mitzayra's birds than to say I'm accepting upon myself Naziris. So the Gemara, as we've said many times, these type of answers, the Gemara says, good question. You're right, maybe I would say that. But we're talking about Nazir Oiver Lefanav. We're talking about where there's a Nazir walking in front of him. There's a Nazir walking in front of him, so therefore that would tell us that Harei Elai Tzipayrim means to say that I'm Naziris. Now, the Gemara assumes right now that even if the Nazir walking in front of him was a Tamei Nazir, as Taisa explains. So the Gemara asks, it says, wait a second. The Dilma, then maybe when this guy said, I'm going to bring is Harei Elai Tzipayrim, maybe it means that he's coming to exempt the Nazir Tamei. Maybe the Nazir that's walking is Tamei. Ulapoitrim in Karbanaisav Kama. And he's coming to exempt him from his Karbanis. How do you know it means that he's going to make himself into Nazir? Maybe he's just going to exempt this Nazir Tamei. This is a Nazir Tamei. He has to bring birds when he finishes the tar process. How do you know he's going to make himself into Nazir? Says the Gemara, no, it's not the way you thought. It's going to show you Nazir Tahar Oivelafanav. We're talking about where a Tahar Nazir is passing in front of him. As Taisa explains, the guy knows. The guy who's taking the nether knows that he's Tahar. And he's saying, Harei Elai Tzipayrim. If you're saying Harei Elai Tzipayrim doesn't mean this guy's, because this guy doesn't have birds, he's not Tamei. So that's what it means a Kabbalah of Naziris. But Taisa says it's still difficult. Because maybe when you're saying I'm accepting upon myself birds, it means if this Nazir who's passing in front of him becomes Tamei, I'll bring his birds, like insurance. How do you know it means that he's making himself into a Nazir? So Taisa says you have to push this and say that it's Torma, for example, where the guy is thinking in his heart that I want to be associating with the mitzvah of Naziris, which has an element of birds, if you become Tamei. So that's why when the Nazir Tar is passing in front of him, it means that he's going to become a Nazir. Now, then Taisa explains, says, previously when the Gemara had asked, maybe it means he's accepting the birds of Mitzayra, why didn't the Gemara then answer, like for example, the Amr Beliboy? Well, we're saying, Taisa is explaining that this Gemara's teretz really, when you say the Nazir Tar Oivelafanav, really has to be also that he's he's thinking this, that he wants to be a Nazir. So why didn't you answer the same thing when the Mitzayra, you asked, maybe he's taking upon himself the Karban Mitzayra, that you should say that he was thinking that he wants to be a Nazir. So you can't do that because the words you're saying of Harei Tzipayim sound more that they're going on the birds of Mitzayra than that of Naziris. As he says, those two reasons that we mentioned before. First of all, Naziris is a tircha and it's very severe on the person who takes them. And also, the words Tzipayim are written explicitly in the Torah by Mitzayra, and it doesn't say it by Nazir. By Nazir it says the word Tayrim, turtle doves. It doesn't say Tzipayim. So even if he's saying in his heart, says Taisus, there's no power in your machshava of your heart to tilt your words to that of Naziris, because then that would be a problem of in piv v'li b'shavan. What you're saying, which are the words Tziparim, which sound like more like Mitzayra, and your heart, which you're thinking I want to be a Nazir, are not the same. That's when the Gemara had asked the question regarding Harei Elai Tziparim to say that it should be that of Mitzayra. But over here, even though Naziris is severe and it's an effort for him, but since there's a Nazir passing in front of him that's Tahar, it's not logical that he's accepting upon himself a Naziris of a Tziparim that are Tameh, because that's not even here yet. And therefore, it's like an equal 50-50 to say what he means to say. Is he accepting Naziris, or is he going to pay the Karbanis when this guy, if he would become Tameh? So that's why it says, it's effective, his thoughts, to say that he wants to accept him on some Naziris, and therefore that's considered as if it's Pivali B'Shav, as if it's the same what you're thinking as what you're saying. Like we had before, when the guy says, hey, I shall be, the wording more understood of Naziris, and to say that he wants it to take effect right away, and even though it's a tircha and it's chomer on him, but it makes more sense than to say, I'm going to be in his place to bring his karbanis after time when he finishes, which therefore since is like an equal spread, so we say, okay, the guy's thoughts will tilt it to say that he's becoming a Nazir and it's Pibali B'Shavan. The only problem, says Taisa, is, I have a beautiful pshat, but the Gemara doesn't mention anything about this, what he's thinking in his heart. Taisus was bothered. He said, how do you know? Who cares even Nazir Tar over Lafanav? Maybe it means he's going to pay this guy's karbanis if and when he becomes Tameh. So he said, no. He's thinking also, the Kama Beliboy, that ich will sein a Nazir. But the Gemara doesn't say anything about it. It's a pretty important variable over here that's not being mentioned. So therefore it says, Taisus from the Maraf, that it's not logical to say that I'm going to take this guy's place, that to say that if he's going to become Tameh, I'm going to be liable in his birds, because the guy's tar right now. So like his words are, it's a davar shalei b'la'olam. It's not even here. So therefore it's more logical to say that the guy is accepting upon himself a Naziris because, and this is important words of Taisus, he says, the davar is the mavur l'fanenu. This is verified in front of us, that you have the ability to accept upon yourself a Naziris right now. So even though it's a very chamer de gezach and it's a tircha to become a Nazir, but l'maisa, there's no other verifiable concept right now. If and when the guy would become Tameh, it's not even here. Why would we think that that's what you're saying? Previously, when the Gemara had asked for Mitzayra, so Taisa addressed, he says, that's also Mavur Lefanenu. What do you mean? There's no Mitzayra passing in front of you. So why is the Gemara asking, maybe it means Harei Litzipar means for Mitzayra? Because Taisa says, no, for sure there's some Mitzayra in the world that needs birds. So that's like a Mavur. It's a legitimate question. But to say, maybe when this Nazir Torah is passing in front of you, means if and when he becomes Tameh, says Maraf, no, that's not even logical to say, and therefore it's not even to say that his thoughts are being machriya. No, because the Gemara doesn't say that. It's not even that. Pasha doesn't make sense to say that it means if and when, because it's not even here. It's not mavur lefanenu. But Nazir says mavur lefanenu, that you could take it on right now, and therefore that's what it means. So you don't have to come on to that svara, which says is a deichik, because the Gemara doesn't mention anything. But now the Gemara continues, it says, okay, my benayu, what's the difference between Rabbi Yochanan and Rish Lakish and explaining the halacha of Mishnah according to Reb Meir? Now, Taisus wonders, he says, wait a second, really, you're asking such a question? Why didn't you answer? The difference between them is, when you say Harei Elai Tzipayrim, stam, what does that mean? According to Rish Lakish, the way he learns in Reb Meir, if all you said Harei Elai Tzipayrim, you wouldn't be a Nazir. You have to mention Harei Elai, you have to say Harei Elai Tzipayrim hasmuchim l'sar, as Rish Lakish explained. He says, it's specifically when you take upon yourself birds that are written near the here. And that's why I said, we'll see, because are you saying those words or not? But that's the Taisus asking. Whereas according to Rabbi Yochanan, where there's nothing to do because if it's written near that of here, if you accept upon yourself tziparim stam, without smuchim lasar, you would be a Nazir, because we're chayshish that you mean to say that you're taking upon yourself a mitzvah that could bring you to the obligation of a tziparim. But then Taisus, his second question is like the Jewish approach, that you ask one question And then the second question actually answers the first question, as Tais is going to explain. He says, but you know what? I'm bothered with Rish Lakish himself. Why does Rish Lakish say that you need to have that, I'm accepting upon myself birds that are near that of here, but Reb Meir in the Mishnah just doesn't say that. He says, Harei Tzipayim. So where does Rish Lakish get this idea of you're only going to be a Nazir if you're saying, I'm taking upon myself the birds that are near the here? So therefore, Taisa says both questions answer each other. According to Rish Lakish, according to Reb Meir, you're right. By just saying birds, you would become a Nazir, but it's specifically if a Nazir is passing by in front of you. Rish Lakish explained Smuchen Lesar. That's to let us know that when you say Tziporim Smuchen Lesar, then even if no Nazir is going to pass in front of you, you're going to be a Nazir that way. But of course, you are going to be a Nazir when you say Tziporim Stam. It just has to be, like we explained for Rabbi Yechanan, when Nazir is over Lefanav. But then says Taisa, wait a second. Since according to Rish Lakish, when you are accepting upon yourself Tziporim Stam, you're not going to be a Nazir unless if a Nazir is passing by in front of him. According to Rabbi Meir, the Gemara should have mentioned this idea that in the teaching of Rish Lakish, that has to be Nazir over Lefanav, just like you explained in Rabbi Yechanan, that has to be Dafkiv Nazir over Lefanav. Says Taisa, what you could say is, now the reason why we had to go through and explain that explicitly by Rabbi Yechanan, more than that, the teaching of Rish Lakish, because according to Rabbi Yechanan is what's called psikale. It's black and white, it's definitive. That even if you say Tziporim Smuchim Lasar Alai, you're not going to be a Nazir according to Rabbi Yechanan, because he doesn't hold to that concept, only if a Nazir is passing by in front of him. Whereas according to Rish Lakish, you could be a Nazir when you say Tziporim Smuchim Lasar, even if a Nazir is not passing in front. Says Tyson, now we understand why the Gemara is asking my Benayu. Because according to them all, even if you don't mention Tziporim Smuchim Lasar, you just mention Tziporim Stam, you would be a Nazir if a Nazir is passing by in front, and if a Nazir is not passing in front, so then just saying Tziporim Stam would not make you a Nazir according to them all. Now the Gemara is going to say, so what is the case that's the difference between them? But you could understand what the Gemara is asking. And now it also makes sense, according to Rish Lakish, that when you say Tziporim Stam, you're not going to be chayiv because of that it's written near Sar in the pasuk. Because if that would be the case, then you should also be chayiv, like we said, when you say eagles or claws or whatever that are closer in the pasuk to that of the here in the pasuk but then that of Tziporim. But rather, what it means to say is you're taking the mitzvah that's smucha l'sar in contrast to just saying the words. So Al Kapanim, the Gemara's question is, my benayu, what's the difference between Rabbi Yechanan and Rish Lakish? And explain the halacha of the Mishnah. Because if you just learn the Gemara simply without Tais, you would say, they're both saying the same halacha, so what's the difference where it's coming from? But Tais is saying more of a deeper question. He's saying, no, what's the difference between them in the explanation of the Mishnah? Because they're both really saying the same halacha. And that says the Gemara, the difference between them is going to Amar, for example, where the person said, the guy says, I'm taking upon myself tziporin that are near that of here is upon me. Even if you say those words, only if Nazir passes by in front, then yes. But if not, because I don't care about these smuchim l'sad, that doesn't mean anything to me. Even though there's no Nazir passing by in front of him, still you're going to be a Nazir because he said So what Taisa explains that this case that we're describing is that he accepted upon himself something that's near birds, which is, in that pasuk as it brought, the growth of the here. Because it sounds like that he's taking a neder in something that could come ultimately to a chiyuv of birds, which is that of Nazir. But if, let's say, he says, harei like tziporim, and he doesn't say, tziporim asmuch l'sar, so then, even according to Rish Lakish, the Nazir is only going to take effect only when the Nazir passes by in front of him. And that's why, like we said, it's not effective. You say, it's upon me to bring eagles. Because the terminology of eagles doesn't sound like any Naziris. That's what Taisa explains. Then he brings an interpretation from Reb Shabsai, who writes a different interpretation. The Gemara's question of my benayu is, in other words, what's the difference between them in explanation of the Mishnah? Because most definitely, it seems that according to Rish Lakish, Reb Meir didn't say his halacha by just regular birds that he's doing chayv in the Nazir. Because if that would be the case, you could ask all the questions that we asked according to Rabbi Yechanan. Obviously, he's going to have to explain the Mishnah like Rabbi Yechanan, and he also cannot explain the Mishnah where he said Tziporim Smuchim L'Sar Alai, because the Mishnah just says Stam, Tziporim Alai. So obviously he holds like Rabbi Yechanan, and it has to be the Nazir passing by in front of him, and that it's a Nazir tar. So that's what the Gemara is asking. If he's explaining the Rabbi Yechanan, so then what's the difference between them and the explanation of the Mishnah? And he says that's really how Taisa explained himself on Amid Aleph, their Masal Tzipar. But Riva has a May. That was the Gemara's question. That was the Gemara's answer. That it's specifically when he says Tzipar Masmuchel Nasar, that's the case of the difference between the Shlakish and Yechanan. But you're right. All the other cases they hold the same thing of Tzipar Mistam. There would have to be Dafka Nazir that's Tar, that's Ovel Lefanav, and then Rish Lakish and Yechanan both agree that's the only case that would make him into a Nazir. Now the Gemara asks, according to both of them, is there really such an opinion? Is that really true? You're telling me everyone agrees according to Rabbanan. The question is even according to a mayor. But both Rabbi and Mishlakish are saying, at least according to some, that a person will not transfer a sanctity by using words that near other words to create a neder. Is that really so? But by the time I learn the Bryce, that seems to indicate that you would become you would be taking a neder by using a word that's near another word that indicates that you want to take such a neder. Because the Bryce says, Yamin. If someone says the right hand, Harez a shvua. So let's say a guy says, Yamin shlo echel kigazah. The right hand that I'm not going to eat this loaf of bread. So the Bryce says, that's an oath. Now, says my time, why would that be an oath? Lav meshum dichsev isn't because it says a pasuk in Daniel. It says vayorim yaminoi. He lifts up his right hand, usmoila in his left, and el shemaim to heaven. Vayishava b'chai ha'olam, and he swore in the life of the world, meaning in God. So you see, by using the word yamin, which is samuch le vayishava b'chai ha'olam, that's going to make it into an oath. So you see, everyone holds mitzvahs b'dava hasamuch. How can you tell me that they don't say that? Somebody said, no, it's not the reason why. The word right hand itself means oath, not because it's near a word of oath. They're telling like Brisa. How do we know that if someone says the right hand, that I'm going to eat this loaf of bread, that it's an oath? It says a pasuk in Yeshai. It says, Nishba Hashem b'yiminai. Hashem swears in his right hand, so you see that the oath is in the yamin, not because it's near that. Now the Gemara just continues. How do you know that if a guy says the left hand, it's also an oath? Shlomo says in the pasuk over there, ubizraya uzay, in the arm of his might, which that means the tefillin, which is on the left hand, and therefore you see that also that he swears in the zraya beuzay. That's the next words in the pasuk. You see that the shvu is also with his left hand. So therefore, if a guy says "Smoil, if I'm going to eat this loaf of bread," is also terminology of an oath. So therefore, it doesn't refute them that at least the Rabbanan or maybe even Remeir hold that a person would not be matfetz b'dava hasamachle. That concludes that Mishnah. Now the Gemara continues the halacha of the next Mishnah, which continues on this idea of taking an acceptance of naziris, where again not a regular bona fide, and that's a well-known concept that the Mishnayos of the Masechta oftentimes start. Not the first halacha. It starts with a complex case because we know most of halacha we actually agree on. Everyone thinks in Judaism everything's a machlokes. Not true. 95% is agreed upon. The 5% that we don't agree upon is what we have all the time about Bavli on. And that's why we always start with complex cases, because of why we're starting with like a guy says, some slang or some partial statement. Zuk namal, zuk hareini nazir. No, we don't need that. We know that. The corpus of Jewish law we all agree on. We start with these complex cases and then we start explaining it, and that's how in the Gemara we show you what's the halacha from that. But next complex case is when a guy doesn't take a regular kabbalas naziris on the whole naziris. Rather, says the Mishnah, a guy says, Harini nazir minachatzanim. Guy says, I'm a nazir from grape seeds, or a minhazagim, or from grape peels, which Taisa explains it's either or, it's not both, as it's obvious in the Gemara. One, either grape seeds or grape skins, uminat taglachas, or from cutting the hair, uminat tuma, from becoming tuma, which these are all different halachas of naziris. So it says the Mishnah, even if he took from one of the halachas, harez a nazir, that would make him into a nazir, and b'chol dikduk nazir alav, and all the precisions of the halachas of naziris are on him. Taisa says very interesting. Why does it have to say that word? Of course, there is a nazir. Why do you have to say the words v'chol dikduk nazir alav? Taisa says because, as we'll see later on the Daled, there's a type of nazir. It's called nazir shimshon. Most people only know of it because when they say the hataras nadarim, say, I fill in nazir. Do say it, you don't say it. But al kapanim, something called nazir shimshon, which shimshon agiba was a nazir, but he was allowed to be metamal amesim. So we're telling you in this Mishnah, v'chol dikduk nazir is allowed to tell you not stam a nazir. All the precisions of nazir are on him, meaning even that he can't be metamal amesim. But the Gemara points out that masnitin Deloi ki Rabbi Shimon. Our Mishnah is obviously not like Rabbi Shimon. Because time learn the Brayis, Rabbi Shimon, he says, Ein chayiv, you're not liable to be a Nazir until you take a Naziris from all of them. Meaning, either you say it all, like Tay says, either you just say Stam, Harelai Nazir, which that would sound like all the halachas of Naziris are on you, or if you're coming to specify, and you say grape seeds and grape skins, then you got to say them all. You got to say about cutting the hair, about becoming tamei. It's not enough to pick one of them to become a Nazir. You would have to mention them all. They say, no, even if you took Nazirs only from one of them, have a Nazir. So you see clearly, halacha Mishnah is not like Reb Shimon. Reb Shimon said it's not enough to say grape skins or grape seeds, or you have to say them all if you're going to say them. And if you don't, you're not going to become a Nazir. Whereas the Rabbanan hold like the halacha of Mishnah that, no, pick one, you'll be a Nazir. So Gemara explains, so my time of Reb Shimon, what's the reason of Reb Shimon that you need to say them all? Because it says, Amakra, look at the pasuk about Midbar. The pasuk says over there, it starts over there, it says, all the days of his Naziris, whatever is made from the grape of the wine, from grape skins from grape seeds to grape skins, the pasuk says, lo yeichel, he's not allowed to eat. Now, you see that your Naziris has to be, like the pasuk says, mikol, from everything. It's not enough to say from partial. It says, Taisa, wait a second. Where do you see anything about cutting the hair and tumah in that pasuk? It just says, mikol hashayas megefen hayayin. But how do you know the mikol would be going on hair cutting and tumah also? So Taisa says, yeah. But since we revealed regarding wine that it's got to be on an ol, same thing would be that your kabbalah has to be also on the cutting of the hair and the tumah, because we learn that from the word of mikol, which means from everything, every halacha related to the Nazirs. Okay. Rabbanan, my time, what's the reason Rabbanan they hold that? No, it's enough to take a kabbalah on one of them. Because Amakra, look at the pasuk before that. The pasuk says, miyayin v'shecher yazer. From wine and from old wine, yazer, he should separate himself. So it sounds like that even by one of these items, he's going to be a Nazir. Why? Because Taisa says, it already said mikol asher yaseh megefen. So why does this pasuk have to say miyayin v'shecher? It seems superfluous. Rather, it's coming to tell us that even if his neder was only by one of these things, his neder of Nazir is going to take effect, and therefore, even when he's being specific, where here it doesn't say anything about chartz and vizag, it doesn't say anything about grape skins or grape seeds, it just says yayin v'shecher, to tell you that no matter what it is that you take a neder of Nazir from, that it's going to make you into a Nazir. That's the reasoning for this machlekes of Shimon and the Ramban. Thank you to any time for hosting us.